You're about to hear a panel discussion that was recently recorded live. Regular listeners to this platform may find the dynamic of this show somewhat different than in our usual long-form interviews. For one, you'll of course be hearing several voices talking together in conversation, rather than an interview of a single guest. Also, there may be some differences in the sound quality, as the various participants are not using the same technologies to connect virtually to the event. But perhaps most notably, unlike with our podcasts, we are not doing any extensive post-production. So you may notice that the conversation has more of a free-flowing, organic feel, distinct from the more polished nature of our podcast interviews. We invite you to check out our website as well, where you can see the accompanying video of this panel discussion. And for those of you who may like to tune in live to our upcoming panels, where you can also ask questions directly to the guests, we invite you to check out our website or any of our social media feeds to learn more about our forthcoming programming. But for now, sit back and enjoy the interesting discussion that follows.
My role, maybe a major role that I take in this Spring Revolution, is a fundraiser. That's what I had been doing from day one, get-go, and that's what I'm still doing until now. There will be little edit roles that I play, but compared to being a fundraiser, nothing else is a big role. So thank you for letting me part of this forum discussion. And by the way, I do as a living as a physician. That has nothing to do with it, but that's the other profession I know. So fundraiser/activist for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And let's next hear from Philip.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Philip Anavit. I came first to Myanmar in 2014. 2014 it was, working with the UN at the time. I'm a democratic governance specialist, so I work with governments and parliaments around the world. I was based in Myanmar, worked with the parliaments, both at the national level and state and regional levels, and also with some central institutions, mostly the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of the Union Government Office. And since the coup, which has shocked me as much as all of you, I've been active on Myanmar, mostly advising development partners, NGOs, on their programmatic response. And I've been doing some volunteering on the side, supporting the, let's say, revolutionary forces. Looking forward to this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now let's hear from Thierry.
Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to people around the world. So my name is Thierry, and I just happen to be born in Myanmar. So I have to involve in this kind of, constant like conflict and everything. So I am a human rights researcher for the past 10 years. I do the documentation, and then I I took a break from all this kind of human rights work for the past 3 years. And then I generally like to be fun, and I like to stay away from any of these political, intellectual kind of thing. But because the coup happened and I have to involve, and then I left the country. I was in the country after the coup for a year, and then I have to leave the country. So I am the new generation of leaving country because of the political instability in the country. Really looking forward to hear from everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Joa, did you want to do those first two introductions again for the recording?
Oh, yes, I suppose let's do that again. And also we have people still coming in. So if we could just go back to the first couple of guests who introduced themselves and do that again. Igor, if you can do it once more, take two of your involvement in Myanmar.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. It is really a kind of a pleasure to join all of you. So I have a very long history of relations with Myanmar. I have a Myanmar friends already 30, 25 years, people who have started to be involved in a struggle for the freedom and democracy in 1988. And for us, I'm Bosnian, but I'm living in a Czech, and that was a little bit like a negative mirror. We in 1889 got our own freedom, and basically after getting our own freedom, we have been really kind of developing significantly. And on the other side, let's say the people of the Myanmar who rose up in 88 have been sitting in a jails and sitting in a house arrests. So for us, it has been like our own story, but the negative side, and that has been emotionally very strong attachment to us. But then my main engagement with the Myanmar, or the deepest one, was between 2011 and 2016, when I was living in a country and running comparative political science courses for the activists, for the former political prisoners. And that is the time when I developed a very, very strong relations with the many people from the ethnic civil society, political parties, 88 generation, NLD. And many of my former students are now heavily involved in the Spring Revolution. So after the attempted coup, I simply started to every single day, let's say, be in touch with them and do whatever I can do to help the Spring Revolution prevail.
Thank you very much for that. And then let's hear once more from Mike, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Mike, and I first got involved in Burma-related things in 2002 when I was an undergraduate, and I visited Mae-Sot, Thailand, and Burma on the other side of the border. And, I've been involved in various capacities since then. Worked at U.S. Campaign for Burma doing congressional advocacy for a couple of years. Left when Burma began its quasi-democratic period. Still stayed in touch with the country, visited a bunch, studied some Burmese at SOAS in London, although I don't remember a word of it. And then when the coup happened, I, got sucked back in, been working on the Burma Act, basically full-time, or more than full-time, from the coup until recently when it passed, now working on things about implementation of that. And the Burma Act is in the United States. So nice to meet all of you. Excited for the talk.
Thank you. And we'd love to hear more about the Burma Act later. We've been following your work closely. For those who haven't attended a panel before and missed the beginning of the recording, I'm Zoe Wild, founder and executive director of One Light Global. We're an international humanitarian organization. And on a personal level, I lived in Myanmar from 2006 to 2008. And it just changed my life being there. It's a country holds a special piece of my heart. And so this work is so important to me. Recently, we were just looking yesterday at how in total, the United States has committed more than almost 25 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration. My organization personally has been working with the Syrian earthquake and Turkey earthquake, and the US has provided 85 million in humanitarian aid. And the US is also providing aid to many other countries that are in war or developing or strategically important to the US, Pakistan, Colombia, Sudan. So many of us are sitting here on the sidelines going, why is this not happening for Myanmar? Why has there not been as much Western engagement in this conflict as in other conflicts around the world? And we'd like to start with you, Igor, because we know that you've been involved in Ukraine and Bosnia and other conflicts, to hear what your perspective is on why the global community is not responding in the same way.
So there are really complex reasons and multiple reasons. And I think in the discussion, we will touch, let's say, many of them, let's say, but let me start a little bit on a really very general level, because I think there are three underlying ways of the thinking, which are in a certain way preventing outside players to get more involved, let's say. So the first, and I call them authoritarian bias, the Goliath bias, and the stability bias. And then these are almost kind of like a prejudice which influence the thinking and the choices which policymakers do even before they start to concretely think about what to do in Myanmar. So the authoritarian bias is a clear one. Authoritarians have inclination to assist other authoritarians. They are terrified from the people's power, And they don't have in principle, problem with the elite to elite politics. Let's say. They don't, in theory, have a problem, let's say, to deal with Aung San Suu Kyi, because she's also in this elite to elite political game. Let's say, but when they see the real, genuine people power and the streets demanding freedom and democracy against the established regime, then authoritarians helps other authoritarians. And that's where the China comes, where the Thailand comes, where the Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam comes. But then we have, maybe I can mention Russia, but Russia is another story. Russia is a spoiler. Russia is somebody who basically, whenever they have opportunity to disrupt and spoil, they use the opportunity and go and disrupt and spoil. But then we have another kind of thinking, and that was something what I call the Goliath bias, which is much more important for us. And that means the assumption that at the end of the day, in today's world, the brutal, ruthless and resourceful Goliath will always prevail at the end over David. That was assumption. And pretty much everybody in the international community made that assumption when the coup happened. And many of them are still very much influenced by this way of the thinking. And that explains the position of the UN agencies in Myanmar. That explains position of the diplomats in Myanmar. That explains India. That explains Japan. That explains Australia. They simply profoundly believe that at the end of the day, the junta will prevail and they want to have their eggs in the nest. The fourth reason, the most critical one, let's say, we are usually kind of inspired by democracy, by freedom, by human rights, but that's not high priority on anybody's list in today's politics. What is the high priority is stability. And the countries around the world, not only kind of the neighboring country, prefer authoritarian stability over chaos, over situation in which they believe, let's say, the country will fall into the war of everybody against everybody. An assumption in Myanmar is that if the military is out of the game, let's say, there will be no central government, and we will have a collapse of the state, which will sooner or later finish in a war of everybody against everybody. This is profoundly wrong reading what's happening in Myanmar. But it is the prejudice which is influencing pretty much everybody. And then, let's say, this is something why all stakeholders basically try to achieve something what they call the negotiating dialogue between all stakeholders, and that means junta as well. And what we need, let's say, when we are approaching internationalists, we need primarily to address these two prejudices, let's say the Goliath prejudice and the stability prejudice. So this is just my kickoff, let's say, for the beginning of the discussion.
Thank you very much for that. We're next going to hear from Mike. And Mike, as someone who has been on Capitol Hill for years, you've seen the narrative surrounding Burma change with the times. Can you walk us through those changes and describe what you've seen post-coup, and maybe also touch upon how you would describe the current political will in Washington now? And finally, if you can touch upon how important is it seeing a message of pan-Myanmar solidarity in the US right now?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. So I would start off by, agreeing with the first speaker. And I would split up those sort of we're talking about the world's response, and the world is a lot of different things. And the US government, which is the small thing that I'm focused on, is a lot of different things. And so those sort of biases, I think, that you're talking about are seen mostly in the federal agencies, like the State Department, the people who are in charge of implementing foreign policy. The Congress, the US Congress, is not run by rationality, it's run by passions. And to the extent that the Burma, Burma policy has been pro-democratic, pro the movement over the past 30 years, it's because it's been in the hands of the Congress, not the rational part of the government, the part of the government that's passionate about stuff. And the thing it used to be passionate about was the democratic narrative centered around Aung San Suu Kyi and it's sort of inspiration about her story. I mean, obviously this is taking place or took place in a much larger sort of context of like the end of history and like the triumph of democracy, like and all that was a salient narrative, 20, 30 years ago, and not a salient narrative anymore. But be that as it may, like Aung San Suu Kyi and that narrative about the NLD really drove US policy because it drove Congress, and Congress pushed the other agencies. When I worked at US Campaign for Burma, literally like Aung San Suu Kyi would write letters, we would get them and we'd give them to Mitch McConnell, and that's like how policy got made. It's a little bit bizarre to think that, but it's true. But then the Rohingya crisis happened, and her image of like this kind of, I think this fairy tale really that people like myself kind of,
We're having a little bit of challenge with your Wi-Fi.
It's not as true. Must be sorry, I'm in this like bizarre hotel in Chiang Mai. It looks like
it's working again.
Okay, good. Okay, so anyway, so you can't sell it on that narrative anymore, because what most Americans know about Burma is that, there was this woman who we used to think was very inspiring, and then she seemed to have some ambiguous role in a genocide, and like that's what most Americans know. And so that narrative's kind of dead. And I think another narrative hasn't really replaced it. I mean, like the better narrative that we try and sell is like, okay, but now it's everybody against the coup and people learned from what happened and et cetera, et cetera. But it's a little bit more complex to sell that. That it's made the US Congress weirdly split, because Mitch McConnell stays in the Aung San Suu Kyi camp and literally everybody else is in I thought the problem was ethno-nationalism camp. And because he's the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, it's then like hard to pass things, although I think we're getting past that. I mean, I think, because this is about the world, not just the US, like you have a similar problem in Indonesia, right? Like Indonesia is a majority Muslim country. When they think of Burma, they think of the Rohingya crisis. They're chairing ASEAN. They're like better than the previous chair, but you have a similar thing where if you're trying to get the passions of the population, like you no longer have a clean story like you used to. If you're trying to go with the more rational part of the government, you have the same problem in a lot of places where you have that sort of bias that the first speaker talked about, where, the people in charge are the ones who they assume will remain in charge, even if they're just in charge of half the country. And so it's hard to make the argument then that like, no, there's this revolution and it's winning and et cetera. I mean, in the US, we also have the problem of like, we just care a lot about our relationship with Thailand, a lot more than we do about our relationship with Burma for obvious reasons. So you have all these different things pushing against it. And
That's
so
not obvious for, could you just say that really quickly?
Sure. Well, so like Thailand is a treaty ally of the United States. We have like very close military to military relations with Thailand. Like, so it's a mutual defense pact. If someone invades Thailand, the US Army would show up. They're very close allies in the Vietnam War. We have very close economic ties with Thailand. Like Kirk Campbell, our Asia czar, before he became the Asia czar, ran something called the Asia Group, which is basically like a business consultancy firm that has business interests all over Asia, like particularly with Thailand. And so, there's military and economic ties with Thailand that just run very, very deep. And, we're afraid of them kind of ending up in the quote unquote China camp. And so, when they tell us not to sanction Myanmar oil and gas, that the U.S. listens very closely to that. And Thailand, has their own problems with sort of like ethnic separatists military organizations, and so they look at Burma through that lens. And so, there's just a lot of trouble to getting Thailand on board with the sort of what we would want the U.S. priority to be. And the U.S. priority, unfortunately, is its relationship with Thailand. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's move to Nandar now. And Nandar, you've played an important role in NUG fundraising efforts since day one. So we're going to get a different perspective from you coming from the inside. And yet, as you shared in our recent podcast discussion, there has not really been great success in engaging communities beyond the diaspora, which is now somewhat breaking their back as they try to carry this burden still 2 years on. So I know that you have several theories as to why the fundraising and advocacy efforts have not quite been able to break through. Can you share your perspective here?
Sure. I will just echo myself that I had spoken before with one-on-one with Joa. So again, my little corner of being a fundraiser, what I find is that our reach is pretty limited. We don't have celebrities on our end, right? Like we don't have anyone big and hotshot coming out and talking about Burma here and there. There were few people who voiced their concern about the coup, including Michelle Yeoh herself in the beginning. Because, she played the role of the lady for Aung San Suu Kyi. I guess she felt the connection with her at a personal level. But yet again, she has her life. There is no more additional voice coming out of her. And we don't have any like Burmese born celebrities in high enough in Hollywood or anywhere else. So there is no social media influence. There is no mainstream media influenced by Burmese people for Burmese people. And also we don't get non-Burmese people influencing for Burma as well. Like, back in the days, Bono was pretty strong about Aung San Suu Kyi, right? U2 was a big fan, but we really don't know where U2 stand right now at this point, right? Since, like Mike was saying, since Rohingya crisis, we got tainted. And Aung San Suu Kyi's image got tainted in the Westerners' eyes. So we don't get that sympathy we used to get back in '88 crisis anymore. So, atrocities are happening every day. Lives are being killed. Houses are being burned down every day. But yet again, those type of atrocities, to be honest and fair, is happening elsewhere in the world too, right? There were Goliaths everywhere. And those little people are being crushed every day. So when people have their own lives, they don't tend to care about those happenings, atrocities as much, unless it is too close to home. To be honest, we know we are this drawn to this situation because this is too close to home, right? I mean, when Rwanda happened, we did not feel this deep or this painful of a suffering for our own. So I don't blame people not being interested in our crisis or our issue, but our job, our duty is to make sure that they keep hearing about this, they keep seeing about this, to keep pushing into the mainstream media or any media that we can have access into. Again, as a Burmese, as a fundraiser, as a grassroots person who doesn't have any reach to anywhere, all I can do and all I can keep doing is keep rounding up people to keep doing what they can, make it be seen, be aware, be known. We got to keep talking about it. We got to keep posting in our social media. We got to be open and frank to anyone who is showing slightest of interest in who you are by opening the conversations and carrying on the conversations. That is how we stay afloat or time to time floating again. So that's where I stand and that's how I feel as a normal, regular Burmese person, what we can do as a diaspora anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandar. And just to follow up with one question on that topic, looking at, as someone who has been involved in fundraising for the NUG and trying to fundraise beyond the diaspora, and because as we know, these last 2 years, let's be frank, the diaspora has been carrying the democracy movement on their backs in every way, and this is not an elite class of Western society. We talked on our podcast about how your efforts in trying to carry it beyond the ethnic groups and beyond the diaspora as a whole, and to trying to reach local engagement, local meaning wherever one is based. In your case, California. In other cases, it would be other cities and other countries, and that not really being successful. Can you go into a little bit of detail of why you think there hasn't been success at being able to bring on, even among soliciting support and donations from normal people or local media, why that hasn't been successful from your involvement?
Yeah. So when I say the unsuccessful efforts, pretty much trying to reach out to the local media to pay attention to what we're doing. So whenever we have like those anniversaries or like a commemorative rallies, we try to invite the local media to at least come for a footage so that we can show up on like a evening news as a 3-minute shot, but it didn't happen. And again, number one thing I think is we, as a regular citizen, just sending an email or filling their forms on their CBS website or whatever, that Fox News, that we are having this rally, come and support us or check us out. That type of, I think the news is not flashy enough or juicy enough for the news anymore, media anymore. There has to be something, out of norm, or usually the bad things make it to the headlines, right? So when this is a group of nationalities rallying for their own country, that doesn't make it to any news. So we never had seen any news vans coming out. So only news media that we get coverage is our own Burmese news media, which is like only online media, not the mainstream. That's number one. Number two is about getting people to come out to see, let alone donating, that what we're doing. Obviously, it's like whenever we say this is a fundraiser event for Burma, they have their other prior engagements, or if they don't have prior engagements, they don't feel like coming out. It's like, oh, they're fundraising for their country, right? And like I said, again, whatever atrocities is happening, it's a little too far from them to strike a chord in their nerves. So again, we don't blame them, but we are trying to figure out how we keep falling flat whenever we try. So if we invite about 100 of our non-Burmese colleagues and friends, we're lucky if only like 15 show up. So the other thing I'm thinking, I'm not blaming our non-Burmese friends. If they were there, they can bring their other non-Burmese friends. So it's like, the white face is a little important, to be honest. So if we have some white face walking around the fundraiser, right, it even attracts other bystanders or even people in the park, right? Like if we were doing it in a park, they get more drawn to it. And it's kind of, I don't want to call it white privilege or anything. I don't want to go there. But yet again, like, hey, even the Americans are involved in there, right? Even the locals are interested in that. What could be their thing, right? Like, so the interest level becomes higher. So I think I'm hoping to collaborate more with our non-Burmese colleagues to show up, to be the presenting faces of our events. Their involvement, their presence adds a lot of spice to our events. So that's where I will be venturing in the future. Dave is our native. So Dave is attending our meeting right now. So Dave, you will be getting a lot more of my call to walk around our fundraisers.
Thank you so much, Nandar. as someone who's been in the humanitarian field now for almost a decade, it's been extremely eye-opening to see how differently the public responds to different crises. How overnight I can raise, $50,000 for Ukraine or for Syria, and really struggle for Uganda or Myanmar to get a fraction of that. We have last year hundreds of thousands of dollars for Ukraine. And I was thinking, because today is also the year anniversary of the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and it is all over the news. And yet now, is it 2-year now anniversary of the attempted coup passed recently, right? Or is it 3, 2? It's 2, right? 2, right? That's right. It was also February, right? So how did that come and go with no media mention? And we have the 1 year in Ukraine. And I think, as Mike spoke to, the politics is complex, but the humanitarianism and the heart is really, in my experience, the response of the people comes from the media, that most people just don't know what's happening. And once it's spread all over the news, then they care. And having celebrities involved does help. Or having, I was thinking about Invisible Children and the video that they shared, and that became ethically complicated, but that really brought attention to the issue. And so, is there something that needs to happen? Igor, I saw you wanted to respond to Nandar.
I just wanted to make a few quick remarks. Let's say that what Mike said. Let's say we are tainted. Let's say this is something what we simply needs to accept and work with that. Let's say that's reality number one. Let's say the reality number thing is, in the last 10 years, the world became extremely complicated. And full of the very serious kind of disruptions, which has basically complicated everybody's lives all around the world. And there has been a significant shrinking of the people's attention on everything. Let's say people are so much exposed to so many traumas that people in a certain way switched off from many, many troubled things around the world. And this is another reality. We must accept that. Ukraine is different. Yes, there are certain moments when a certain kind of things capture everybody's attention, but Ukraine is our war. Ukraine is Western war in which West is defending itself, or the European democracies are defending themselves from something what they see their direct threat on them. So it's completely something different. Myanmar is not the national interest or security interest of the Europe. It's not even the security national interest of the United States. And this is the third reality. So we should not compare in that sense ourselves with the Ukraine. It's a different story, and we need to work with what we have. It's simple like that.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to move next to hearing from Philip. So, Philip, on one hand, you've been very critical of outside countries not doing more to support the NUG, saying that it's simply not defensible. Additionally, you've argued with evidence that the NUG meets the basic definition of legitimacy, especially when one takes into consideration that they are not a peacetime government. On the other hand, you've also expressed concern about this, quote, culture of sacrifice that is embedded in the NUG, going back decades to the NLD, which inhibits a more sustainable bureaucracy from taking shape and perhaps even getting greater outside engagement. So from each side, can you describe how these factors have played a role in limiting greater foreign engagement than we've been seeing?
Thank you very much. I just want to say I agree fully with what Igor just said now. I think these comparisons between Myanmar and Ukraine are not helpful. I don't think they're very interesting. They may be interesting on a superficial level, but they're not very interesting when you look at the factors that are behind it. I'm European, right? For Europe, this is an existential threat to our way of living. This will always be the priority. There would not have been any chance of anybody providing any weapons in Ukraine had this not been seen as an existential threat. So this is not politics as usual. This is crisis mode. As Igor has said, this is basically the West is at war, as much at war as we can be at war given the state of our societies, I think, right now. So that's that. As for the topic for the NUG, I'm gonna try and make it very short. What I've been arguing, I don't think we need to argue about the democratic legitimacy. We know the mandate, the electoral mandate from 2020, which is one element. You also know the broad response that the NUG are getting, or the broader democratic coalition, which is not just the NUG, which is often forgotten in media reporting. What is also important is, and that's what you've referred to in the introduction, is the fact that the NUG is actually acting as a government. It's not acting as a, you shouldn't compare it with a peacetime government. You shouldn't compare it. We don't argue that they control X amount of territory. I know there have been claims in the past that there's the majority of the country under NUG control. All of that clearly is not the case. But the basic functions of a government, of an executive government, are performed by the NUG. That's, I think, established, which is basically that they act like a government. They provide services in a number of areas. Talk about education, talk about health. They have a public administration in the form of the CDMers, some of thousands of which are actually active as a volunteer public administration, if you will. They have certain security presence. They have presence in local governance. We're all aware of the PAPAs, the public administration bodies under the NUG, and then the ethnic armed forces or ethnic revolutionary forces have their own administrative structures. These structures are in large part of the countries for people's daily lives more relevant than whatever it is that the junta is doing, which is certainly not government as in government that gives you any say and makes decisions. The junta has a withering administration, is what I would call it. And it's a militarized withering administration. So there's zero service delivery, more or less, going on in most parts of the country. And so if you go through these criteria that you usually apply to governments, including also the fact that there is an evolving judiciary system, still basic but evolving. There's evolving civilian security, meaning these local security groups that are on the ground. You have the criteria of a government. One thing I just briefly want to touch on, which has been mentioned, which is a question that you haven't put directly to me here, but I think I want to comment quickly, is the question of why there isn't so much support and why support has not been forthcoming. And I don't think it's just, as Igor has said, the stability bias. I think it's also a general lack of interest. If you look at, Mike has already spoken a bit about the US, but if you look at the EU, for instance, in the region, the EU has a clear focus on what they want out of ASEAN. They have a clear focus on commercial relations. And now they see everything through the Ukraine prism, including so my wife happens to work for the EU, so I know it, including everywhere they are, everything is Ukraine right now. So there is just not enough interest in a place like Myanmar. I think that's a fact. And that's something that can be changed through the media. That's something that can be changed to a certain degree by advocacy, but I don't think we're going to change that fundamentally. That's not going to change fundamentally. The other aspect that you asked me about that I just want to quickly touch upon is what we call the culture of sacrifice. I'm not sure I would be as strong in my statement as you were as an inhibiting factor. I think this culture of sacrifice is what keeps this revolution alive. It is what keeps people in the diaspora, the people that Nanda works with and everybody else, donating a significant amount of their incomes. As you mentioned, They have, these incomes are not high. These are not rich people normally. These are middle-class people, working-class people. And it's also what sustains the CDM, the public administration, that is a volunteer body. I mean, we just have to think about it. There's tens of thousands of volunteers that are supported by communities that are forming an administration. It's quite remarkable. And I think these are some stories that I think haven't been told enough. There's some good stories to be told if you manage to grab people's attention. So that's one aspect. The negative effect of the culture of sacrifice may be that politics is very personalized. People are who they are in the political, formal and informal hierarchy by their track record of resisting the military. That's basically what it is. And that is totally understandable from history and from the political culture. But that also means that when two people get into a room that are very important and they disagree, then things can go wrong quickly and can be derailed. So it leads to a very personalized politics that can be an inhibiting factor when you have to amalgate so many different interests as you have in a national unity government, right? Even in any national unity government, but particularly probably in a national unity government that has so many actors with limited experience of actually governing. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. I feel like you just brought in a lot of really powerful threads. And I can see people are already starting to put questions in the chat. But we'd like to speak to Theory first before we open up the dialogue for questions. Theory, you've spoken about this dynamic of the people-to-people level and this unified narrative that continues to come up in these answers. And also the need for credible information to go out to the public. And I'm curious if that is to the larger public or to the Burmese diaspora. Can you share more about what you feel like needs to happen to change the response?
Thank you, Zoe. So what I see is a two level. Like one is the political level, which is the policy levels and everything, which is practically deadlocked. That's being said that SIDAT, the SAC has been very step-on that they don't really want to resolve. I don't see any intention of them wanting to resolve. And also everybody just ended up with the ASEAN 5-point consensus, which is not really working at all. But that's the political deadlock, which I don't really want to touch upon that because there are other panelists have already said about this. So the other level, the people-to-people campaign, the fact that people don't know about Myanmar, I think, because we don't really, we couldn't really. Then a lot of our information, a lot of the news about us happening, other than the beginning of the protest and everything. For I remember like 2 months straight, every day we are on the headline of the news. That was like because when people remember Myanmar as some kind of, people remember Myanmar as a country with the icons of democracy, and then fall from grace and like the Rohingyas genocide, the whole country denying, and then from there to this creative expressions, and I really we came back to the global stage with so much hope and so much possibilities, and we bring the positive news and positive energies to the world. So that was the beginning, but then the crackdown happens and the news are not there anymore. So one thing I would say that having needs for the credible information at the moment, the situation is that the civil space, the non-violent space has been shrinking since the movement have been shifted more towards the violence resistance, which is protected, and I have no opinions on that. But the thing is, we have a shrinking of the civil space. Is actually from the news perspective, as a fixer myself working with the international media, that the way international media work is more as a news story. Like we can't just invite them, hey, we have a protest, please come and cover. That's not how my understanding, that's not how they work. So we have to have a story of us, and like compelling story. So for that, we need the credible information. At the moment, the situation on the ground is that it's very difficult for any of us to do the reporting. Like journalists got killed, or they're not even done, like their family member can be taken as hostage, or distant relative, and a lot of barriers. And one journalist got arrested. They're not even charged with the charges related to the press. They will be charged with the terrorism act, or like they can get killed for supporting of the public people defense forces and everything. So the situation on the ground is very difficult for us to do the news, and then we cannot really go to the ground. A lot of foreign journalists cannot go to the ground, like as opposed to Ukraine, which I don't really like to compare. Not for also, like, we shouldn't really compare about the victimhood, like who suffer more. That's not the computation of suffering. I am glad people stand up for injustice. But in terms of the credible information, getting the credible information on the ground, many places where the conflict is happening, like in Middle Burma, on the luckiest day, they could only get 2G internet. So it's very difficult for us to get the credible information. And a lot of the information we have been receiving on the social media, but we cannot just publish this kind of news, and we cannot really communicate that kind of news without the verification process. So that's why we became like circulating among our Burmese language social media, and we couldn't really produce much out to the world, which is not to blame anyone, but this is the practical challenges that we are facing. So for that, this is the situation of the credible information and getting the difficulty of getting the information out. But we like to approach more on the people-to-people campaign. Doesn't matter how complex situation is, people or like different background of the causes of the conflict. It's a personal story, like personal human connection is very important. So we trying to shift me and my friends and a few new generation and creative people, we trying to shift our approach rather than hitting the deadlock rather than punching the wall. We are trying to find the alternative way, like different strategy to do the people-to-people campaign by telling our story in our own word. Like we are not the pathetic little human from a conflict society. We want to approach the world with hope and with love and with resilience, and we want to show people how we are living and how we are creating amidst all the tragedies and everything. So the war already have enough tragedy. We don't want to be crying baby and just tell people like, hey, you should look at us. And no, that's not how our generation wants to approach. We want to approach us like, look at us, look at the past 10 years, the openness. This is how we have come because of the openness for the past 10 years. But if we could have more time to open, this is what we could bring to the world. This is what we can contribute to any society that we go. So we've been trying to do the people-to-people campaign, not to bring the tragedy. Yes, we're going to inform about the violation, but we like to bring the new way of living, like how we are living. Look at us, like let's work together. You should help us not because of our tragedy, because we deserve to live just like you, and everybody should work together. We shouldn't compete for any suffering. So I'm going to stop here, but I can touch upon things later. Thank you.
Thank you, Theory. As always, it's so powerful when you share, and coming from the humanitarian perspective as opposed to a policy perspective. Couldn't agree with you more that, you reminded me of that Margaret Mead quote that the only thing that has ever changed history is a small group of committed people. And you bring up some really interesting points about perhaps how we can support youth to create more movements here rather than trying to get people to send money to direct aid. And perhaps that would add more leverage. I'm curious, we've heard a lot about some of the challenges, about the biases, about policy, about the lack of PR, the need for a unified narrative, the lack of funding and geopolitics. And I'm curious about solutions and how you feel, and this is to all of the speakers, how you feel that we can shift, what needs to happen to shift this, and why does it matter? Mike.
Sure. So I think just in terms of solutions, I think that like, and this is again sort of a policy thing, but like, I think one problem that the Burma movement has is like there's all this sort of human rights informed ways of thinking about things where it's like you write the report, you show the report to the policymaker, and then something happens where like I don't think policy has ever been made that way ever in the history of the world. And but policy, I think like it's a power question. And like, you know, we had all these problems with the Burma Act and getting it passed, right? The way we got it passed was we got a bunch of Baptists to support it because there are tons of Baptists from Burma and they live in the US now and they vote Republican and they're like really kind of like involved in that particular political structure. And you know, like right before the Burma Act passed, like Mitch McConnell literally called a Chin Baptist church and talked to them. And it's the Chin Baptist talking points that were incorporated into the Burma Act, the final version of it. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is like, I think thinking about like which constituencies are sort of natural constituencies and like, and which ones of them hold power, right? Like in the US, like religious conservatives have a lot of power. And so, and luckily there's a lot of religious conservatives from Burma. So like, it's like, you know, like working on, you know, leveraging that. And I think it has to be thought about in those sort of terms. And I don't know. And to the extent that we think in those terms, I think we can win. I think to the extent that we're like, you know, hey, like I have this like really well thought out report and I'm going to go show it to the policymaker. It's like, it's kind of a waste of time, I think, in my opinion. But anyway, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that. And I saw that Philip also had his hand raised. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So fully agree with Mike there. I think that's what it is. What we, I think, have to remember is that what you really need isn't that much support, right? It's not like that you need the support that Ukraine gets. You don't need that support. You don't need it militarily, and you certainly don't need it on the civilian front. So I think focused action is very good. And I think the way that the NUG, if we talk about the efforts that are being made, have mobilized the diaspora is absolutely great. And this has been a success story. The way international engagement has worked hasn't always been as successful. What I would like to see is a shift to ASEAN. As weird as it sounds, there's a lot of effort from a lot of people on the US, and I understand the US because the US are critical, because I tell you, the only ones who are putting any money anywhere are the US. There just isn't anybody else doing anything. And I say that accusingly. I accuse the EU, I accuse the Australians, I accuse everybody. It is just the US. And that really has to change. And the costs are not big of doing that. There's no domestic penalty for doing that. It's just the costs of not doing it are very, very low because there are no domestic penalties. There is no, and Ukraine, again, is everything everybody thinks about. And so there's no brain space for that. That has to be changed, as Mike has said, through advocacy. And I think that's important. And as for ASEAN, I think there was a question also here in the comments that related to how important is Malaysia. I think very important. How important is the incoming chairmanship of Indonesia? Very, very important. The current chairmanship of Indonesia, the fact that we're going to see a dialogue that for the first time includes the NUG. I'm not saying that the solution will be dialogue between the junta and the NUG. I don't think that, but there needs to be international dialogue with the NUG. because that socializes the NUG in this role as part of the solution, because there are still a number of actors on the ground that, because there is so little pressure in their own societies, they're having positions that are detrimental. And I think, Igor, you know very well who I'm talking about. I'll just say the Swiss have been very naughty in that sense in Myanmar, where it doesn't carry a lot of domestic penalty and you get a lot of leeway, right? So you have a very committed person out there in an embassy, especially for smaller countries like my own Austria or the case of Switzerland, where they get to make the policy of the country in this low priority country. Like, it's individuals, they have pre-existing relationships, they sell their views of the solution as the solution back home through their channels in their ministry. And it sort of is the policy because it is like low priority. And so it's even more dangerous when the country is low priority. More bad things happen, more mess ups happen. And that's the same. One more thing, just very quickly, another example is Austria, my own country, where we had the non-accredited ambassador being greeted by our president. So all of a sudden there pops up this picture of the non-accredited ambassador shaking the hands of my president, and everybody thinks, what is going on? What's going on is that for a certain event where the diplomatic community was invited, there were people there were people uninvited. Uninvited were the Russians, the Belarusians, the Russians, the Belarusians, and the Iranians were uninvited. But nobody thought about the fact that you have an unaccredited ambassador from Myanmar that walks up there and shakes the hand of the president. That's a huge propaganda victory for the junta. I don't know how much it matters in the long run, but that's what happens when Myanmar is a low priority in the country. So you have to at least shift it up to a middling priority if you can. I mean, those small increments can make a difference, as a matter of fact. Sorry for the wordy statement.
No, thank you for that. And we'll go, I saw Igor had his hand up next, so we'll go to him. But just before we do, I just want to encourage all panelists. We're having a stream of questions come through the chat, I think probably more than we can get through orally. So I'd just like to encourage the panelists, when you're not speaking, to take a look at them. And if any of the conversations or questions coming from the chat spur a reflection in your answer, please just pick it up yourself, because it's wonderful. We're getting so much engagement, but we don't have time to go through everything individually. So please look yourself for what's relevant. And with that, let's hear from Igor.
So I'll just make two comments. Let's say one is when I'm on a daily basis, let's say, talking with the friends in Myanmar and going through their disappointments with the international community. One of the things what I always repeat is that the future of the Myanmar will be decided domestically. Let's say that 80% of the factors which are deciding about the future of the Myanmar are in the country. Let's say the whatever international community, whatever outside players will do, let's say, will influence 20 to 30%, not more. So in that sense, let's say, really priority of our struggle is consolidate the political alliance in the country. Let's say the keep alive the resilience of the people. Part of that is diaspora as well. Let's say, and don't over expect too much from the internationals from all the obstacles what we are talking about, because when you expect too much, let's say, then the only thing what you get disappointment. When you get disappointment, you get this kind of the moral, emotional downturn, which, let's say, take away energy from your own struggle or your own resilience. So this is kind of the one important thing. The second important thing, what I see as a problem, and this is something what we can change and what we can improve. The part of our problem is what was partly said, that we don't have a clear voice. Let's say but part of that is we are so decentralized movement. Let's say there are so many actors participating in a Myanmar struggle, and this is part of our strength. But at the same time, let's say, that means that every single moment we are speaking 10 different messages. We are running in 10 different directions, and instead of kind of having a clear message, let's say, to the international players, we are creating the noise of the too many messages communicated by us. So what I think, let's say, what we need to do, we can't change that. Let's say we will continue, let's say, to basically all these different players doing their own messaging and their own campaigns and activities. But we need to practice how we, on a certain regular basis, align ourselves into the common joint campaigns. Let's say, because when we pull together all the diasporas, let's say, the certain number of the advocacy groups which have a lot of experience, when we pull together the capacity of the local protest groups to create a very strong messages on the ground with a fantastically powerful pictures, let's say, when we bring the NUG in that kind of the aligned communicating, we can be much more clear and much more in a certain way effective in communicating. So this is one of the things what I think that we need to do it, let's say, to practice pulling together all different actors which are in this moment communicating on behalf of the Myanmar. And from time to time, I usually say once in a month and a half, we need to come together and have a one specific focus what we are communicating for a 2 weeks period.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to go to Theory with a question next, based on what we've been hearing and what's been coming on in the chat. I know this is something that she's been interested and talked about before. There's a message on the chat that there's no Zelensky in Myanmar, and that Aung San Suu Kyi, as Michael talked about, has left this real void. And Theory, is someone who is you've in your talk just now and sharing your perspective, talked about the values and the motivation of what Generation Z wants to portray to the world, and the vibe that the younger Myanmar activists are having. And yet what you're talking about is more of a general vibe or feeling of getting out there. What to say of like a charismatic figure? Do you, in someone from your own position who's been trying to get this message out, is it enough to just have the messaging itself, or is it important to start to identify or to build up or to locate someone who can embody these traits and to really bring them up so that they're more known on the media? So what are your thoughts about this?
So in terms of the crisis, in the situation, I think usually having a figure always being helpful, because people don't want to know what's happening. They just want to know, okay, who is telling, and they like to follow. But we have a history that we used to have one. I saw the comment. Yeah, we used to have Aung San Suu Kyi, which has been a great figure, but then she couldn't really meet. There's always a danger of the charismatic leaders, and that can go. So I think in terms of the movement, I think we need figures, we need faces. I think that's more like practical way to approach it, but maybe not just one, because like what if one fail? So we need more people. Yeah, we need Zelensky as like more, but by which I don't mean the people with the military uniform. So one thing I've been concerning lately is that we have new leaders, we have new civilians, young leaders, civilians, ministers and something, and everyone, when they go to the field, I noticed that on their social media, they've been wearing the military uniform as a public relation, which actually really concerned me, because the whole idea of us fighting is to end the militarized dictatorship. It's beyond ending the Democrat, beyond ending Sitta. So I think we need more people, but the civilians leader should be ahead of the military leaders. Like people should listen to them. People with arms should listen to them, not because they are wearing a military uniform, but because they are the civilians leaders. So because we just want to, this is a chance for us to rebuild our society with from the militarized dictatorship to more civic-led democracy. So to answer your question short, like, do we need it? I think strategically we need new leaders. We need to have leaders not only from the people defense forces, but also from the non-violence leader, maybe also from the diaspora, because also another thing about diaspora, every time when we talk about Burma, we often leave the diaspora population out. because they're not Burma enough and something. That's what people say. But this is a time for us to be all included, and we can have more than one leaders. So I think we all need to work together. But again, we cannot just have the leaders. It's we need to have a common narrative and common goal. So my analysis with the revolution itself at the moment is that we have a vision, which is very broad and very, very principled, very moral based, and that very, very broad and vague, that cannot be achieved. That is good to have a vision. But also we have tactics, which is like military response and also the nonviolent response. Those are tactics. So our revolution, I think we have a vision, we have a tactic, but I don't think we have a goal, and because we don't have a goal, I don't think we have a strategy. So whoever the new leader or leaders is good to have. We should definitely have it as a public relation and to engage with the people. But also before that, we need to go through the common understanding and agree upon episode of goal and like the achievable goal. And maybe we also need to show the bite-sized success to the public. It can be I imagine to have more leaders that will be coming from a different background, different skill set, and we will have different opinion, we will have different approach, which is fine. We can debate, which is fine, but we have, as long as we have a common goal. So more like we need leader, but also we need a clear message of when we tell other people. We cannot be vague, like we cannot approach with like we don't know what we want to do. We need to be clear about what we want to do. So I think yes, we need more people. Maybe better than Zelensky. Can we not be better than Zelensky? Can we not be better than Aung San Suu Kyi? Why do we have to be just them? Like, can we not be better? If we can be better, why can we not be better? But we need more than one person to be check and balance.
Thank you, Theory. You bring up so many important points. And actually, I was thinking of Arab Spring, when you're talking of, do we need a leader that is a specific leader? Do we need multiple leaders, or can a generation be a leader? And I'd love to hear more about what you feel is the shared vision, and how is that different than a goal? What is the goal that you see? And I also wanted to, Nandar, you spoke in the chat about the need for more valid documentation and data to get these added threats brewing in Burma that can affect regionally and globally the response. And listening to Theory, it sounds like, not only more valid documentation of the atrocities, but also of the positive movements. So if either of you would speak to that would be wonderful.
May I? Yeah, so the chat answer I was replying to was Patty's point of view, like she raised a good, valid point about speaking of or making it aware that under this military dictatorship, they are opening doors to Russian nuclear plants to be started in Burma. They're trying to, Russia is trying to turn Burma into North Korea, basically. And they're another stronger foothold in Asia. So that we need to get it out as a potential valid threat to regionally and globally. Because at this point, everyone had accepted Russia as the common villain, right? Like someone who will invade or be destroying anyone at their own will at any point in time. So association with Russia alone should validate someone to be a bad person, like who you associate with, make you who you are. So that has to be kept reminding to the Western world, the free world, that, hey, Russia is not only invading your local, just spreading locally, trying to get hold of Europe. It's even trying to get a hold or a footstand in Asia. So that will be one point. The other point is about the cybersecurity and the human trafficking, slavery, the new era slavery type of thing. That is happening pretty much, to be honest, under China. So China has been toying with Burma for a while now. They had been getting a whole load of whatever they want from the border areas to begin with. Now they're getting more, if anything, and they're abusing all that. So that, but the issue is we got only like anecdotal little snippets or like, videos, but that's not like a documentation per se to showcase or to make a case about this is actually happening and this will spread to your country, telling Laos, Cambodia, I mean, not that they don't know, they also are dealing with it anyways on a daily basis. But, if we let China run wild on us, let them run our lives, it's going to happen to your countries. Your stability, your security is going to be affected. So we definitely need to have those type of data documentation. Again, the validity of what we want to showcase has to come. To be honest, to call it a solution, I don't know how to get them because, I can't get access as much as you guys get access to. But my point here is if we can make the Western world, again, mainstream media or more effective people to go out and gather those data documentations. Obviously, the world listens to CNN more than our Irrawaddy, right? Or our own medias, even RFAs or VOA, right? So CNN carries, Washington Post carries, New York Times carries more weight when it comes to those, showing something happening, like opening a book or discovery, like breaking news to the wall. So that would be a good idea to have them started covering the downfalls or the being taken advantage of the situation, the instability of the situation. So unless, you guys come out to help us, you are next type of message had to be sent to the local ASEAN. My point.
Thank you for that. We have a couple panelists with raised hands. I'll go to Philip next.
I think Igor was first. Igor, do you want to come first?
Just go ahead. Go ahead. I can do it.
Okay, mine is very quick. Just addressing two questions. The one that was asked by Patricia first. I think what Nanda has already answered most of it. I think it's a good storyline. I don't think it makes
sorry,
it the world.
Can you rephrase the question? Just, I think you're reading off the chat.
The question. Sorry. Yeah, the question was whether the full breakdown of anything remotely being state control in the borderlands between Myanmar and Laos and the new trends of cybercrime and scamming and the slavery that has been beginning to be reported, whether that is something that would concern the international community and would serve to focus more attention. I would say it is a great narrative that can be used, as Nanda has said, to raise attention because it's a novelty thing. Everybody who I tell about this, just their eyes pop open. How is this even possible? But I don't think it will change it. I don't think it's going to be very influential because if you remember how many drugs have been going out of that region for how long and how the export of drugs, the production export of drugs, and of course we know it's linked to the junta directly, indirectly, has exploded and hasn't changed the stance of anybody. Except if you remember, in fact, Australia, there was a discovery by a senator that they were still engaging with the junta to stem the flow of drugs, which of course the junta is also responsible for creating to a certain degree. So I think very often outside powers, when they see a problem, they turn to whoever they may think will be the easiest fix in the short run, and they don't look at the structural issues behind it. So I think it's an interesting thought. I think it should be raised more in the media. I don't think it will be the answer. I just want to quickly respond to what Paul said about the EU and the the UK Foreign Office not being happy with what I said about the US being the only one that's funding. I'm not talking about, classical development. I'm not talking about humanitarian work. I'm not talking about support to civil society. I'm talking about who supports the democratic actors, meaning the NUG, the NUCC, and the CRPH. And it isn't anybody else. And that's a fact. And I have been saying that forever. And it's not a question of money. It's just a fact. That's just to clarify. Thanks.
Great. And Igor, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to follow up a little bit on the things what Thierry has I was talking about that before, and that is about the really necessity to come up with the positive narratives. Let's say not with these kind of the suffering victim, let's say narrative, because let's say when we are talking to the outside world about atrocities, there are so many atrocities happening all around the globe, on some other places. We simply don't catch attention. Talking about the threats, talking about Russia as a threat, yes, let's say that is kind of a strong argument, but it's not sufficient one, let's say. So we need to highlight that. But the most important thing, what we need a positive narrative coming from the country and saying, let's say, that we are winning this struggle. Let's say we will win at the end. Let's say, and this is the kind of the positive promised land future what we are building. And we need to have exciting, charismatic people as a messengers communicating that to the outside world. So we need the narrative of the hope. We need to have a narrative of the winning. Let's say this is the only thing how we can attract the attention in this moment.
Thank you. Andy just asked, is the post-colonial history of Burma as a long-running civil war contributing to outsiders writing the revolution off as just another civil war? And if so, how can the movement in Burma differentiate itself from this fallacy? I think this really speaks to this need for a new narrative. And I'm curious if there are ideas in this group of what that new narrative might be that could engage. And can there be a narrative that engages both the internal population and the diaspora and larger political figures? That's for anyone.
I'll say something probably unsatisfactory, and then somebody can jump in. But I think that, like, to some degree, like, we need different narratives for different groups of folk. I mean, I think a lot when we're talking about the world, like we're sort of talking about the West, but obviously ASEAN is extremely important, as you guys are talking about. And as I'm sitting in Thailand right now, my brain is a little bit more in that than it was when I was in Washington, although I'll be back to Washington soon. But I mean, I think thinking about, like, okay, like, what do people in Indonesia, what do they care about? Like, there should be some NUG people in Jakarta right now, like, hanging out, like, trying to make friends, with, and trying to figure out, like, how do you make friends there? I mean, in DC, we've been trying that to some success. I mean, like, we're giving out little sandwiches at our event, which is definitely the way to make friends in DC. And so, like, that, I don't know exactly what it is in Jakarta, but, like, I think that you need some of that going on. But I think, I don't know, let 1,000 narratives bloom, but be strategic about it, right? Like, if you're going to a Baptist convention, talk about all the Baptists, like, if so anyway, yeah, that's my initial thought. Maybe some people have some better ideas though.
I saw Philip had his hand raised.
No, I did not. If I have the floor, I just really wanna agree with what especially Igor has said before. The need for a narrative and the need for a group of people to communicate the narrative, and the narrative doesn't need to be very complicated. I mean, I hate to do this, but I have to say, right now, the junta narrative is easier to understand than the narrative of the revolutionary forces. The junta 5-point plan, we all know, is not much of a plan, but I can tell you what it is because it's 5 points. The revolutionary forces haven't been able to come up with that kind of narrative yet. And you don't need not only the statement, but you need people to articulate that consistently and repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. As boring as it feels for the person doing it, that's what it needs to get the attention from media. That's what it needs when you go into a meeting with a foreign government official. And as Mike has said, the people in Indonesia, there is a bit of a network around the foreign ministry. We know that they have representative offices. Also, these structures necessarily for resource reasons rely heavily on the diaspora. I've said it before, I think there should be investment in, these are again, volunteers without huge budgets, but there should be investment in the capacity of these people, giving them more guidance, being clearer on messaging. And I think that's one of the things where there can be improvement and quick wins on, communicating what you want better.
Thank you for that. I want to go to Theory next. And Theory, there's been some robust online chat that you've been engaged in that I'm wondering if you can bring to audio and introduce this from the start for people that are not reading the chat, what is being talked about and how you've been responding to it. And then also following up with what Philip said, which really underscores the value and the importance of solidarity and easy messages, which at face value kind of contrasts with what you're saying in terms of diverse opinions and a public forum where people are expressing themselves. So maybe you can also pick that apart.
Yeah, sure. I've been more into that typing and stuff. So about the different opinions, so I think we definitely need different opinions, but we also need to be aware of the urgency of the situation. We cannot be oh, we want to go this way, we want to go that way. So think of it as a journey. So we have a vehicle to go there, but maybe these leaders, their role, the people that I named some people because they happen to be on the media, on the platform. So I just name, I'm not saying they are the only leaders. They are more than that, but I'm just giving an example. So the role of these leadership, the new leaderships and something, it's just to, guide us. We have among some leader, if we have a comment go off, okay, we're going to go to, let's say, Washington, D.C. If the trip is well, somebody wants to go to Washington, D.C., somebody wants to go to New York City. But we need some leaders to tell us, okay, we are going to go to Washington, D.C. at this point, and we're going to go to New York City another point. But so instead of we are debating and a lot of voices over where we want to go, then we wouldn't go anywhere. Instead, we should just one person, those leaders are to be okay, we're going to go to Washington, D.C. this time at this period. And then let people discuss about how we want to get to Washington, D.C., whether we want to take the bus, whether we want to fly, whether we want to walk and something. So I think we should debate more on the how, because we have the urgency. We cannot not everything can be happening at the same time. There have to be the episode of trip and episode of the destiny. Otherwise, we won't get anywhere. So it's good. We should have a space for the debate, but also we should have a common goal of where we want to go at a certain point. It doesn't mean that just because we go to Washington, D.C. at this point, doesn't mean that we're not going to New York City. We are not going to New York City at this certain moment. So these leadership, whoever the leadership would be, what I expect as the follower, I don't want to be a leader. I really want to follow anyone who just wants to lead, because so they just need to say, okay, this is where we are going, and then clear plan. And then if they ask, how do you want to go? I will be involving in that. But it's wasted a lot of time when we decide okay, I want to go there, I want to go here. So we need to have a coordinate effort. So whatever happening at the policy level, and now I'm working with a creative community, sometimes they don't really go together. So right now what we're trying to do is whatever happening on the policy level, the intellectual talks or whatever the leaders are saying, I'm trying to translate it into the creative messaging, talk to the creative people, and then creative messaging to the broader public. So we are working like a like a chain, like one after another, because everyone play a role. Like these people that I name, they're my friends. But because I name them as leader, not because they're my friends. I don't agree with them on many level, and I sometimes don't even like them. But this is necessary. Because we always say Burmese culture, like if you have two people, we split into three. Let's get over. Let's break that cycle of this is not something to be proud of. We should be more like brave enough to overcome the culture together with the revolution. Things doesn't work, we need to get rid of, and we may not like people, we have very different, we have really we are challenged to trust each other, but it's more like working trust and working unity, build on it just to get somewhere. And then rather than we like them personally or not, we should put right people in the right place. Oftentimes I think like that's also relevant to Gominting question that you said as a Gen Z, which I'm not a Gen Z, I'm 10 years older than Gen Z. But the thing is, we need to, my understanding of Myanmar is that many times they're good people, but just because we don't like each other, we don't really share the space. We don't really expand the space for other people to come in because we don't like this person. I don't like this person. I don't like that. And so I just want to move beyond that. Maybe we don't like them, maybe we don't trust them, but maybe this person is the right person to be there. Even if this person is an enemy, we should create a space, because let's not be the crap society where people pull down everyone. We just support each other. We amplify our voice. We work together. We're going to call out for the value that doesn't align with us. We're also going to call in people, but at the same time, we're going to amplify. If someone do a good job, I think we should amplify our effort. So that's overall. I don't know if I answer your question. I'm just saying whatever I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Theory. Nandar, so you have your hand up, and just right before that, Theory, is it possible that you could just say in one sentence what you feel like the vision is? Before you said the vision is clear.
What vision is? My personal vision is that I want to go home. I want everyone to go home, including the soldiers, including Myanmar and all the family, because I want everybody to go home live peace. All of you, like, go home and just, have fun time with the family, secure and safety and secure in a daily life in your home without needing to leave home, having a choice to either go back home or not. So that's basically my only vision is to go home.
So the vision, home, living peacefully, and the goal is how you do that. Is that what you're saying? And that's the goal.
To build that home, right? That home. But it's also like episode. But I am not going to talk about this here because it would be really long. But the point is that we should make like a goal that is with the episode. Like, okay, this goal is to maybe like get rid of the military from the political space. That's one goal, and then one strategy. And then middle part, like, how do we envision the future? That's another goal and another episode. And so it can be coming all together, but we should have a clear goal in every stage.
Thank you for clarifying that. Nandar, please join in.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Theory, because, we're the Burmese bonds. We have this Burmese culture kind of imprinted in us, right? So we know when we talk about Burmese nature, like how Burmese think, right? And how Burmese roll. So we have this tendency to have a lot of keeping it to self, right? Like, so when you believe in something, when you have a value system, you just treasure it, right? And you treasure it secretly. The issue with Burmese is like they are so secretive, like, and we were brought up to be secretive. It's a nurture too. So you have a vision, or you have a belief system, you have a value system, and you just stick to it. No matter what you're doing, either good thing or bad thing or in middle, right? Like, or not dealing with anything. You stick to your value system and you don't share with anyone. So the issue of us, our Burmese people, not able to work together, I mean, that's what I see in diaspora, mainly is that whenever they have different value systems, they cannot work together, even if they share the same goal, even if they want to do the same work, right? But their value systems are different. So because of that value system, they really cannot work together anymore. It's becoming like, instead of fighting the common enemy, you just start bickering at each other. I guess every other person, every other nationality in the world might have that. It's just the level of how high or how low that is. We feel like, right, Thierry? We feel like our Burmese people are really high in that level. So it's like they like to bicker around each other. They want to point fingers at each other, and they totally lost what their major goal is, the common goal is. So we should be, when we want to fight a system, when we want to unroot a brought up bad culture, we need to start from within, right? Like we need to start from us. That's how we should be always reminding ourselves to be successful in whatever we're doing, including this Spring Revolution. We need to tone down on our belief systems and value systems and always bring ourselves back to what I am doing it for. What is my goal here, right? Like, yeah. And also we were brought up and taught to be grateful to anything and everyone who had done even a little drop of something for us, right? So we have to stick to that culture, obviously, because if we are not grateful for what had been done so far, like the EU sanctioning over and over and over again for, more and more people that are connected with the junta, and US for, stepping up this far, having NDAA inclusion for 2 years in a row, and this final year, they even included Burma Act in the NDAA, right? So whoever's effort it is, as a collective effort that was put into happening this, including you, Mike, Mike and other cohort of people making it happen. We have to be grateful. We have to be grateful to the US Congress and Senate and the House for passing that. So with that grateful sensation, when we move forward, it's positive feedback, positive attitude that we can build our path even better. If we just go by with the disappointment and feeling, why me, right? Like, why are people not caring for us, that we're being ignored? If we move forward that way, it's harder because, you are going with this bitterness. You're moving, but you're moving with the hardship in your inner soul. That's not helpful. So we really have to make sure we carry on the grateful and positive, looking at counting the blessings type of thing when we keep moving forward. Plus, we need to get rid of our culture of that self-righteousness and my value is the only value, my way is the only way type of thing, when we need to work together. And I totally agree with Thierry that we have to change our narratives that, we don't have a Zelensky right now, definitely. We don't even have Aung San Suu Kyi anymore, right? Because she is not that icon in the eyes of the world anymore. So we need to have newer heroes. And I put the S in there as a plural, the newer heroes as a collective, like all Burmese people are heroes that are doing this. So, but we just have to keep pushing that narrative, and we just have to have that plan Bs and plan Cs always handy. That's the only way I could think of right now to keep moving forward and staying afloat in the eyes of the world, and to getting to closer to success of our revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandar. I have one follow-up question I'd like to ask you, and then Igor has his hand raised, and we'll go there next. And I also just want to put on the table, people in the chat have been asking, what about China, and how should we be, what should we be thinking about narrative in terms of China? So maybe that's the next topic. But first things first, Nandar, the question I'd like to follow up with you is that you began your talk just now by referencing how the internal dynamics of how Burmese should talk and relate to each other. And then you moved on from there looking at the external dynamics of how people within the diaspora in Myanmar should look at the international community. And I wanted to comment on a couple things with that and ask your opinion. So one thing I'd like to comment on is in our podcast conversation, you referenced how you feel that Burmese have a culture, and in the diaspora as well, of wanting to keep your problems to yourself. You gave the very evocative example of you might have Burmese going to work with Americans or other Westerners with a smile, and then they come home and they cry, and they're not showing their crying to their colleagues. So there could be more of an effort, especially in Western countries, of being more extroverted and sharing rather than wanting to shelter the burden by oneself. So that's one thing I'd like to ask you about, to comment on. But then the second is, you talk about this idea of gratitude to foreign people and organizations that are doing things, which is very nice in one way, to recognize where help has come. I also see that as a concern when it goes too far. And the example I'm thinking of is that after the coup happened, there was almost no there were almost no celebrities or influencers who from foreign countries who made any comment. One of the only exceptions was Rihanna. Rihanna had a tweet that said "praying for Myanmar," and I mean, in Myanmar itself, people loved it. They were so happy to have this single tweet. Well, last week Rihanna was performing at the Super Bowl, and what did she wear in front of the widest television audience of the year? What did she wear but a blood ruby from Burma? And so there was immediately this concern about this righteous concern about how could she wear this. But there was also, I noticed in the online community, there was a lot of sympathy for still believing that she held Burma close to heart, even though she was wearing this blood diamond. And so, this blood gem. And so I'm also wondering, in expressing this gratitude, how is this balanced with a realistic approach of what people are really doing and where their mindset is? So anyway, that's a lot to throw at you, but to pick that apart, and then we'll go to Igor after this.
Well, again, her wearing that ruby could be a symbol of that she wants to show that she treasures us, right? That maybe that's her intention. I mean, if you are not a pessimistic, hateful person, you can consider it that way. She was putting Burma on her hand, right? Like showing off to the whole of the United States or other parts of the world who might be watching the Super Bowl. But yet again, if you want to also consider it as a blood ruby, right? Which is, again, who can confirm it was a blood ruby, right? I mean, most of 90% of the rubies are blood rubies, yes, definitely. But yet again, it might have come through stringent officiating, certification process too, right? So we should not be, again, going microscoping, dividing things when it comes to support. That's my point here. If someone supports you, be grateful. Just take it and leave it at that. Don't go beyond okay, where is this coming from, right? How did she get it? Doesn't she know this is built on the backs of the blood of the regular people? If we want to talk like that, if we pick all those women, Burmese women wearing jewelries, they know where this is coming from, and yet they still wear it. So, the blood diamond from Africa too, right? We almost all of us know almost all the diamonds coming from Africa are blood diamonds, but yet women who cannot resist jewelry, they still wear it. So I don't find value in nitpicking those little things. It's like when she wears a Burmese ruby, we should be grateful. We should be proud about that. Period. That's it. Stop there, right? Don't go beyond there. I mean, unless you know for a fact she got it as a gift from a junta leader or, a junta, the crony person, right? So something like that. And that's why my point here is let's focus on the positive things and move forward with those positive things that we won't hurt our own feelings. It's all about the perceptions. When you start perceiving things in negative ways, it hurts you. It hurts your energy. It hurts your ability to move forward in the positive direction. So I don't know if I answer your question. We were sticking to Rihanna, I think, at this point.
Sure. Well, with limited time left, let's go to Igor, who had his hand up.
So I think that Myanmar is currently full of the extraordinary, fascinating people who are stories, who are big stories, and particularly in a generation between 20 and 30 or 35. Let's say when we are talking about leaders and so on, we have Myanmar is a leaderful in this moment, and particularly in that generation. So in that sense, I really think, let's say, that we need to do two things. One is, let's say, to package a little bit, let's say, all these extraordinary people who are now driving the different forms of the Spring Revolution, package them a little bit, let's say, get that stories into the English language and other languages, and find a way how we communicate them as a flow of information, let's say, because there is something in the Myanmar struggle which is comparable with the anti-apartheid movement. It's a hard story, but it's a winning story in which kind of the fascinating people are changing their country in a profound way through the extraordinary danger and threat. And we can get this story, let's say. The problem is a little bit, let's say, that in a Myanmar culture, let's say, particularly when you are younger, you don't go in front. Let's say, you let other seniors to take the stage. And I think, let's say, that the Myanmar young generation should be just a little bit more kind of the ready, let's say, to take this stage which they deserve to have with everything what they have done in the last 2 years. When we are talking about the vision and about what is this thing, a couple of people have asked it, just to give my contribution. I think that we should say that the future of the Myanmar is a country where people will be safe, which they have not been for the 50 years. Let's say. So we are bringing the country where people will simply be safe, that nobody can harass, torture, and mistreat them. The Myanmar of the future will be the country where people will not be discriminated, but will be respected. And the third thing, that Myanmar of the future will be a country in which first 20 years, the natural wealth of that country will go to correct the past injustices. Military has created 70 years of the suffering of the people. There are so many people who have been the victims, and we need to promise to the people of the country that the next 20 years, all oil money will go into reparation of the suffering, or to recover the burned villages, to help the families who have gone through the lost family members, to recover the lives of the people who have been in the jail, to recover the lives of the people, let's say, who have gone through the ethnic cleansing. Let's say, we need to use the wealth of the money for that, and that should be the promise we are giving to the people in a struggle which they have now.
Any of our other guests, would you like to add to that? Philip?
Yeah, I agree with Igor. Those are good domestic messages. The international, I think the messages to the international communities are quite simple. They have been said in statements, but they haven't been said clearly enough and repeated clearly enough. And not always is it clear who can speak for whom. And then there's individual organizations coming out with statements criticizing that leader or this leader, and that's all not always super helpful. But I think the messaging is clear. I've seen all of them in the chat here. The idea of Myanmar being a good citizen of the world, of being a country that will make sure it polices its borders, will make sure to crack down on the illicit economy, that federalism is actually a model that everybody is committed to, including the Burma. That's an important point, I think, not only for Myanmar domestically, but also internationally, because people know what the dynamics have been in the country, that they're committed to democracy, that they continue to have a non-aligned foreign policy, which is also important. Myanmar has always had that, and I think that was a success story. If you want one foreign policy of the success story of the NLD government, it was their relationship with China. And that relationship with China will be important for Myanmar going forward, because you can't just put a country and take it off the map and put it somewhere else. And I think, because the question came up on China, that so far relations with China, this has been managed well. We know China is more interested in the NLD than it is interested in the NUG at this point in time. That will only change if the NUG stays around, becomes more powerful. Then the Chinese will start dealing with them. And at this point in time, it's just don't antagonize, try to make contact, and engage the Chinese. And that's, not everybody may like it, but I think that's just what's required right now.
And Theory, you have your hand up too.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up like what I expect the international community to do, like not I have already shared the vision. So one is that do not downgrade our movement, our resistance. We have come this far that the fact that it's already 2 years and over 2 years, and they've been killing us every day, torturing us, and do every brutality you can think of they've been doing. But still, we haven't really surrendered yet. So the fact that we're still fighting is that we have come so far because they cannot be governed. We cannot be governed. The military cannot really govern us. So any information, however you portray about us, do not lose hope on us. Like we are fighting, we have come this far. So look at what we have, all the people in the CDM and people of Myanmar. So I would appreciate it. People just say, maybe at the end of the day, military is going to win. That is not helpful. No, they are not winning. We have a potential to win. We're not winning yet, but we are going to win, and we have a chance to win. We're not losing. So that's one thing. Narrative. I'm talking about ourselves in our own work. And two, support the Resilient project and the resilience and people-to-people project. Any work. So people-to-people process all the work means that maybe with the people of the other country or people within the country, more like Unity Project or the Resilient Project that support that, and either financially or mentally, or share it on your social media or talk to your friends and family. So that's what you can do. And also invest in the new generation, because we are already we're traumatized, and then it's really difficult for us to get out of the things that get to think outside of the box. So invest in the new generation, because if you invest now, in 10 years, 20 years, they will be in place for when the country rebuild it. And support the mental health program. It's much needed. A lot of us going through the mental health crisis, and that mental health support for the people defense forces and for the protester, and also for the people crossing the border at the border. And so that's the thing. And also the refugees or the immigrants that are in your country. We want to live with dignity. Just because we became a refugee, just because we became an immigrant, we shouldn't downgrade, or we shouldn't give up our life. We don't want to work in the gas station. We don't want to work in the McDonald's, anything. We are people with skill set. So let us live with dignity. Let us go home with dignity. So that's like basic things that I really expect you to do. The change start from you. And thank you very much for coming today, because I know, the fact that you're already here means that you cares about us. I really appreciate it. Please keep on supporting us, and do not save us. We don't want to be safe. So just support us. This is our fight. We're going to fight, and just support us.
Thank you for that, Theory. And Igor, you also had your hand up.
I agree. Let's say with every single word what Theory said. Let's say it's to add one thing, when for example I'm talking with anybody from the international kind of the players, what I'm saying, I'm usually saying, let's say that Myanmar junta is breaking the country into the 5 to 7 kind of the pieces, and the Myanmar junta will never ever be able, let's say, to reconsolidate the power and control of the country. So as long as the international community is tolerating and thinking about the junta as a part of the solution, then the only thing what they are doing is they are giving the time for the real state collapse, let's say, because the junta is the one who is creating the state collapse. If the international community will invest into the NUG and all the kind of the political and social forces which are standing now behind the Spring Revolution, we have a chance to bring the peace in the country. We have a chance, let's say, to pull the country together, let's say, to be the stable, prospering, peaceful place. Let's say. So this is the kind of the narrative what I'm sharing when I'm speaking with anybody in international politics.
Thank you. We are about at time to end this conversation. So I just want to see if there are any last urgent questions that people feel to share before we close. And also to mention again that Insight Myanmar and One Light Global have been running fundraisers for humanitarian efforts in Burma and in Myanmar. And if you would like to donate to that, you can do so at insightmyanmar.org/donations. You can also do that at onelightglobal.org/donate. Just be sure to put a note in that it is for Myanmar. And that link will be in the chat.
And I also want to add from my side that all of these 5 panelists have appeared on Insight Myanmar podcast as guests. Some have appeared multiple times. And so if you're curious to hear any of the respective perspectives of these guests, you can go and hear their full long-form interviews, and encourage you to also check out any of our other episodes on the topic. And this panel will also become a podcast. So this will eventually get into audio form. But with that, I also wanted to follow up with what Zoe has said. If there are any final questions, or if any of the panelists would like to make any closing statements before we end here. And I should also mention that we will be having ongoing panels. And so this is our third. Our fourth one, we already is already scheduled. The date is not set yet. It will be on the subject of engaged Buddhism. And we will be having some Buddhist leaders both within and outside the country on that one. We'll inform you as time gets closer. But before we close this one, any final comments or questions people would like to say? Nandar, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to say a closing statement. I totally agree. Second, what Thierry just said and mentioned, we will keep our fight. We will keep on doing what we're supposed to be doing, because it's our, it's our duty, our inborn duty and responsibility, but we cannot do it ourselves. Well, not that we cannot. It will take longer if we had to do it all on our own. So we will definitely appreciate, whoever supporting us in any means and ways. It means a lot. When you push with more hands, the distance gets further. So we definitely are appreciative of anyone, including you guys, Igor, Philip, Mike, you guys can leave Burma out of your mind, but you don't. You put your heart into it. That is beyond that. Our appreciation is like, you guys are supporting us getting out of your way. So we would wish and hope that other non-Burmese international people with ability and strength be helpful, supporting us, pushing us forward so that we can finish this sooner. The sooner, the better. The suffering will be less for the people on the ground. So we are appreciative of everyone. We are going to keep working inside out. And there will be more. Thank you.
Thank you. And to follow that, each of you is struggling, fighting for Burma in your own way. And if there are ways that people can get involved in your work, we'd love to hear that. So whether that's through policy, you just passed the Myanmar Act, but is there the Burma Act, is there another way that people can get involved? Is there, Nandar, you're doing, it sounds like, public events, and Theory also, you've talked about collaborative discussions. How can people listening to this support each of you personally in your work?
I saw Igor, you had your hand. Oh, Mike, go ahead, Mike, and then Igor.
A tiny thing. So this is like, now that the Burma Act is passed, now you need to fund it. And so like watching appropriations is important, especially if you're in the US, and simply you could call your member of Congress and tell them to appropriate the amount that the Burma Act asked for, but can join various mailing lists to find out in more detail. Yeah, so that's that. And I would just say like a closing is like, narrative is very important, but I think thinking about interest and how that actually drives things, I think, is really important. I mean, at the end of the day, it was Baptists who brought the Burma Act across the finish line. At the end of the day, Republicans care about Baptists because Baptists elect Republicans and their job is to get elected, right? So I think that's just like something to keep in mind when you're approaching people. Like, narrative matters, but like crass self-interest is also very important in this world. So there's a lot of room for that too. So anyway, those are my last few cents.
Thank you. And please do share any links, either if you have them off the bat in the chat, or send them to Joe or I so that we can send them in follow-up emails where people can write to their Congress people and their representatives or donate. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's also a great reminder from Mike that part of the narrative is knowing who you're speaking to. It's knowing who your audience is. And I talk about this all the time where I'm coming from when giving presentations. When I go to give presentations on Myanmar to a local meditation group, I'm not talking about the power of hip hop. And when I'm going to an art collective or talk about people who care about art, I'm not talking about the Burma Act. No offense, Mike. But so just knowing who your audience is can be very powerful, and being able to navigate how to bring them into the story. Igor, you wanted to share something.
I just want to tell one story. Let's say there is a beautiful scene in one of the Tarkovsky's film when the old man is going together with the small man, and they are carrying the dry branch. Let's say, and then in one moment the old man put the dry branch in the earth and say to the small boy or small man, bring every day water and just kind of put the water here and do it just every day, let's say, and this branch will become full of the flowers. And I think, let's say, we are now in Myanmar in that story. Let's say every single of us should bring a few drops of the water every single day or once in a week, let's say, and we will see the miracle happening. Let's say the something what looks so terrifying story will become a beautiful story. Let's say we can bring something what anti-apartheid movement was, what Solidarność movement was. We can be the big winning story, let's say, which can bring the really kind of flowers and in a victory of the Spring Revolution. Let's say. So my call is, let's say, just do it, just keep on doing it. Let's say every single day a miracle will happen.
Anyone else, how we can support you? Thank you for that beautiful image, Igor. I'm wondering if after this conversation, I'm seeing so many comments thanking the speakers, the panelists, hosts, sponsors, attendees. We've heard these conversations are really rare, and we really appreciate you all taking your time to be here. And I'm wondering if after this conversation, are you feeling like, are your shoulders down? Are you feeling like, oh, it's still just a struggle, or has some weight been lifted? Are we feeling like there's a possibility or a little crack in the door?
Show must go on.
Well, thank you everyone so much for your time and sharing today. We will be sharing this recording, and any links that you would like us to share, we'll share with people. I also know that Insight Myanmar is going to DC next week, and then to New York, where I will meet them. So we can, we're continually looking and open to new ideas and any way to continue to share this message further and make an impact on a humanitarian and political level for Myanmar and with Myanmar. So
That's right. And we encourage people to check out our website, Inside Myanmar, also Better Burma, the nonprofit that sponsors that mission. If there is a voice you would like to be heard on an upcoming panel or podcast, yours or another's that's involved, we're trying to bring out these diverse perspectives as much as possible to learn from each other and to, as has been talked about in this conversation, democracy is not about liking everyone, it's about respecting the different opinions and being able to come to the table. And that's what we're trying to do. And so if there is someone else you would suggest bringing to the table, please get in touch with us through email. And I'd like to echo what Theory said, just showing up for those people that that simply attended this 2-hour talk, for those people listening months from now on the podcast, or this will become, or YouTube. We appreciate that as well. This is a big part of it. I do see a question there. Does Insight Myanmar have NGO status? The nonprofit is Better Burma, and yes, Better Burma is a 501c3, as Zoe just said. Insight Myanmar is part of the Better Burma mission, and I'm talking, so I can't right now. But if someone could write the address of Better Burma or Insight Myanmar in there for a website to be able to check out all of our humanitarian as well as media work, that would be great. And this has just been so exciting. This has been so lively and robust. And I think I could speak for all of us when I say that this conversation has, both in chat form and oral form, has moved in so many diverse directions that we've barely been able to cover everything that's come up. But I think this is just a testament to how much people care about this. And as Zoe said, I hope that some kind of burden has been off the shoulders of some of the panelists and the guests that are on here.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
For whatever reason, even as the conflict in Myanmar continues to worsen, it somehow continues to be shut out of the Western media news cycle. And even when the foreign media does report on the conflict, it's often presented as a reductionist, simplistic caricature that inhibits a more thorough understanding of the situation. In contrast, our podcast platform endeavors to portray a much more authentic, detailed, and dynamic reality of the country and its people, one that nurtures deeper understanding and nuanced appreciation. Not only do we ensure that a broad cross-section of ideas and perspectives from Burmese guests regularly appear on our platform, but we also try to bring in foreign experts, scholars, and allies who can share from their experience as well. But we can't continue to produce at this consistency and at the level of quality we aim for without your help. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause in both websites except credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.